Alright, so what we're going to do is we are going to code in that problem that we talked about at the end of class last week. And so that problem is we have a radio station that is offering a promotion, and if you win, you either get $250 or you get your height in quarters as the winning. Now, we did sketch out the algorithm for this in class, so now let's go and actually start coding things in. So the first thing I'm going to do is I want to create a variable for a quarter height. So we're just going to call that quarter underscore height, and we're going to set that equal to 0.069 inches. So that is the thickness of a quarter, in case anybody cared. And so from now, let us go, and the first thing that we want to do, what do we need to do? Well, we need to get information from the user of how tall they are. And so we're going to ask them for feet and inches, because typically you don't walk around. If somebody asked me how tall I was, I would tell them I'm 6 foot tall. I would not tell them I'm 72 inches. So we will get the information from the user in the way that they give it to us, and then we will convert it into inches. So the first thing we need is we need a variable to put this in. So the first thing is we're going to ask them what their height in feet is. And it is an input which comes in as a string. We'll immediately change that to a number. So we'll say float, and we're going to float the input. And the input will be enter. Oh, got to remember our quotation marks so that knows it's a string. So enter the number of feet in your height. And we will put a colon and a space there so it looks nice and pretty when it comes out. And then we will do h underscore inch for your height in inches. We'll do the same thing. We will float the input, and that input is going to be enter the number of inches in your height. And same thing, colon, space, so it all looks good. And so once we have all of that information, we need to calculate out your height in inches. So we'll sit there and we will just call that variable height, and we're going to run math on it. So we're going to say h underscore inch, because that is our number of inches, and then we will add to that our number of inches in our height, in our feet, so h underscore feet, and we'll multiply that by 12, and so that will give us all of our inches. And so from there, let's print out to the user how tall they are, and so we can check our code. So print your height is, let's go that way, your height is, and now we want to actually bring this numerical value that we've calculated into our thing. So we're going to concate in the information. So we're going to use a plus, and since it is number data, we are going to convert it to a string, so str for string, and then we're just going to bring in height. So that's going to grab the height, it's going to turn it into string data, so we can put it in right with our print statement. And then from there we will go, your height is blank in inches. And we'll put the in there. So let's test the code out, and I'm going to run that, enter the number of height in your feet. So we'll say 6 foot, and we'll say 3 inches. So your height is 75 in inches. Well, let's just make it 75 inches. That'll make a lot more sense. Okay, and so the other thing is what happens if we don't string this? Well, if I just take this out and say, just add in my variable of height, and we run it, you see we get an error, because the height thing is, we can only concate in strings, not float data. So that's why we've done that. So let's go back to str height and just quickly run that again. Want to make sure that works. So we'll say 7'3", so your height is 87 inches. Great. So now we have this first part together where we get the inputs. Let's calculate out now how much money we would end up getting. So we can go through here and go, well, let's call it the height value because this is the value that we're going to have by height. And so we're going to take your height and we're going to divide it by our quarter height. There we go, quarter height. And then we're going to multiply that by 25 cents because that is our value of a quarter. And then what I want to do is I want to round this to just 2 decimal places for money. We do have a command where we can import locale and have it do everything with a locale, but right now let's just do this a little bit more by hand. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my height value and I'm going to redefine it because we're just going to rewrite over it. And what I'm going to say is I'm going to use a command called round, which allows me to round data. And so height value, and we're going to say to round that to 2. So what's going to happen here is it's going to define height value in this line. We're going to go to the next line, and it's going to run this function first and then restore the height value. So basically we've just rewritten the height value, and let's run another check at this point. So we'll go print, and we'll say that you will receive, and we'll concate this in, plus str for our string, and we will go height underscore value and plus. So you will receive that amount of money. And so from here, make sure we get a space based on height. And actually, we'll put the $ here. So it prints out the $ right before it prints out that stuff. And let's run that and see how that works. So feet and height, we'll go to 5 foot. We'll say we're 5'11", so our height is 71 inches, and we will receive $257.25 based on height. All right, so at this point now, we need to look at putting in that if statement to figure out what they should do. Because, I mean, we can look at this and go, hey, that's $257. That's more than $250. We'll just take that. But we want to automate this a little bit more. One other thing that I do want to point out is, I buried this quarter in here. Typically that's fine. I mean, we have quarter height defined as a variable because what happens if we end up changing things to a different coin? So this right down here, we don't, this was fine the way it is, but usually you don't want to bury that in the code. So let's go and change this. Instead of quarter height, let's just call this coin height to make it a little bit more generic so we can change it, and then we'll do coin value. It makes things a little bit more generic so we can reuse this code and rewrite it. Now what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to change every place as quarter height to coin height. Fortunately, this error comes up and says, hey, we don't know what quarter height means, which is great, so we can go and change that to coin height. And then I'll change this 0.25 to coin value. And so this is just like Excel, trying to keep things as generic as possible so we can change things. All right, and did I misspell coin value? Coin height. No, I just got it in there twice, so let's clean that up. Okay, so it's very happy with that. Let's run this one more time to make sure that we're working. And there we go. So constantly, as we're writing code, we're constantly checking it to make sure that everything's in the right spot and everything's working fine. So it's a lot easier to check this as we go. Now, we're going to end the video here. The next video, we're going to write the if statement to report back to the user what they should end up taking.